Welcome back to the channel, Legendary Legacy, Audiobook Free Daily, a channel that shares the audio recap and full audiobook of the legendary best-selling books of all time without spending a penny. Today, we will continue with the book, Thick Face, Black Heart by author Chin-Ning Chu. This is a book that teaches you how to apply the ancient wisdom of Asian philosophy and strategy to achieve success in business and life. We will proceed with Episode 12, Acquiring the Killer Instinct. You can listen to the recap audiobook episodes of the channel are published on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and other podcast platforms. You can search for our channel by typing Legendary Legacy, Audiobook Recap into the search bar. Please support our channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing so that we have more motivation to produce more audiobook episodes with the best and latest quality. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. What is the killer instinct? In today's world, to succeed in life, you must have the will and tenacity to finish the job. Among bold fighters, there are many who can work close to the horns, displaying great bravery and brilliant technique, but the great ones are recognized by how they handle themselves in the moment of truth, killing quickly and cleanly. The courage to finish the job quickly and cleanly, that is the killer instinct, the root of black heart. Every great man and every great villain has it. This killer instinct can help an individual accomplish great tasks to benefit mankind, and it can propel an individual to bring destruction on earth. A knife has great utility value, and without it, life would be extremely convenient, yet a knife is also a deadly weapon. The killer instinct is another aspect of the thick face, black heart. It has ensured man's survival against the hostile elements of nature as well as from one another since the time of the caveman. In today's civilized societies, the cruder elements of human behavior have been polished and refined. The killer instinct has undergone an outward transformation, but in some parts of the world, even today, the animal nature of the killer instinct remains intact. The application has varied, but the essence remains. In this chapter we will examine the efficacy of the killer instinct in action, rather than judge its moral value. Understand, however, that I am in no way endorsing violent behavior. The killer instinct that I am addressing here is not an outward action. Rather, it is the inward state that guides your will to direct your actions to accomplish your objectives. If we have any hope of correcting our timid nature, we must not turn our face away from the dark side of reality. If our enemies are incorporating the killer instinct and victimizing us, then we do not have the luxury of avoiding the topic. As the great military strategist Sun Tzu said, know yourself, know your opponent, 100 battles, 100 victories. The Asian perspective of killer instinct. To sacrifice the smaller for the larger is natural in Asian culture, whereas to Westerners this is barbaric and inhumane. From the Asian point of view, it is a natural course of action. This is why the Japanese never had any problems recruiting sufficient kamikaze pilots for their suicide missions during the latter part of World War II. Japan's only problem was that there were not enough airplanes. Represented in China's 5,000 years of recorded history are gigantic numbers of individuals who struggled endlessly for power and glory. The Chinese history books have become textbooks for learning and developing the art of the killer instinct. These books have been widely studied by the Koreans and Japanese, not for their historical value, but as guides to human behavior. They learned how the ancient Chinese heroes formulated their intricate strategies and, most importantly, how they executed these ruthless strategies to achieve their goals. The heroes of Asia have for the most part, been men who possessed the perfect killer instinct. At times these killer instincts were utilized justly. At other times, however, they were abused. The following are stories from ancient China which demonstrate the application of the killer instinct to obtain specific objectives. Liu Bang. One of the most documented rivalries in Chinese history was between Liu Bang and Xiang Yu. After the fall of the Qin dynasty in the 2nd century BC, they battled each other for the control of China. Xiang Yu began with every advantage. He had the best troops, most of China was already under his control, and he was a great warrior and a brilliant strategist. During the 3-year struggle, Xiang Yu fought countless battles and lost only one. But in losing one, he ultimately lost China to a man who was his inferior in every way except in the practice of thick face, black heart. In one of his early victories, Xiang Yu captured Liu Bang. The throne was within Xiang Yu's grasp, yet he let it slip away. In acknowledgement of his admiration for Liu Bang as a great warrior, and according to his own sense of a soldier's honor, Xiang Yu honored his defeated foe by granting him living quarters instead of executing him. This misguided act provided Liu Bang the opportunity for escape, and he subsequently regrouped his forces and returned to conquer Xiang Yu's army. On the surface, Xiang Yu's mercy might seem to have been a noble action, but true nobility would have caused Xiang Yu to strike down Liu Bang when he had the opportunity. If he had done so, he would have ended years of chaos in China and untold misery suffered by millions of the common people. Xiang Yu had personally taken on the destiny of becoming the ruler of China. It was for this purpose that he had launched the bloody civil war in the first place. He already had the blood of over 100,000 men on his hands. The blood of Liu Bang was merely one more. It was improper of him to forsake his objective at such a moment. The Chinese people just wanted to see one of them die quickly. They did not care who ruled China, they only wanted an end to this miserable war. After Xiang Yu's one and only defeat, it was this same soldier's honor that prevented him from returning to his province to regroup. He could not face his people after losing so many of their sons. Instead, he took his own life. Liu Bang's military commander, Han Xian, characterized Xiang Yu's weaknesses by saying that he had the benevolence of a woman and the valor of a peasant. Xiang Yu killed people ruthlessly on the battlefield, yet at the moment of truth when he stood before his defeated foe, he abandoned his objective and took refuge in a false image of his own nobility, masking his weakness as the noblesse oblige of one great warrior to another. Liu Bang did not have Xiang Yu's accomplishments, but neither was he encumbered by any of Xiang Yu's concept of honor. During the years of their conflict, Liu Bang repeatedly lost battles to Xiang Yu, but he was never ashamed to return to his province to conscript another army. His heart was also blacker than Xiang Yu's. He could do whatever was required to fulfill his ambition without regard to the cost to others. When Xiang Yu felt victory slipping away in their final battle, he ordered that Liu Bang's father, who had been his prisoner for many years, be brought out and tied in front of a pot of boiling oil. Liu Bang was commanded to retreat with all his forces or see his father boiled alive. Liu rode to the front of his troops and shouted, "You and I were blood brothers at one time, General Xiang. My father is also yours. If you wish to cook our father, please share a cup of the broth with me." Liu Bang's thick face, black heart was not reserved for his enemies. His closest companions also became victims. During his struggle with Xiang Yu, Liu Bang was assisted by 3 very able advisors, Han Xian, Xiao He, and Zhang Liang. It was largely through the efforts of these men that the Han dynasty, the ruling family of China for 4 centuries, was established. As the first commoner in the history of China to ascend to the position of the Son of Heaven, Liu Bang was determined that other ambitious men not get the idea that anyone could make himself the Emperor of China. In order to secure his position, Liu Bang found it necessary to rid himself of his former comrades in arms. Zhang Liang had an in-depth understanding of human nature. After the final victory over Xiang Yu, he wisely took his leave of the emperor and retired to a life as a reclusive monk in the forest. He knew that the very abilities that made him valuable to Liu Bang during his years of struggle would now guarantee his death if he remained at court. Lifted him from disgrace and given him an opportunity to become a great general. He did not wish to believe that he was locked in a life-or-death struggle with his longtime patron. Meanwhile, Han Xian was approached by other members of the court who were plotting to overthrow Liu Bang. When Liu Bang invited Han Xian to court for a banquet, Han Xin thrust his doubts aside and left the safety of his military camp. The result of this gesture of trust was that, upon Han's arrival at court, the emperor had his old compan Ion minced up into a meat sauce. During the years of warfare, it was Xiao Hei's job to follow behind the army and see to the administration of the conquered territories. After his final victory, Liu Bang made him prime minister. Xiao Hei was a brilliant administrator. He created the concept of managing the affairs of government through a systematic delegation of authority and responsibility. This bureaucratic management system is still used today by governments worldwide. Because of the efficiency and fairness of his administration, Xiao Hei became so popular with the people that Liu Bang became fearful. The emperor found a pretext to imprison Xiao Hei until he was an old, broken man who no longer posed any threat. In successfully accomplishing your life's objectives and ambitions, there is a direct relationship between the scope of your ambition and your ability to tap deep into your killer instinct. The greater your ambition, the more able and willing you must be to exercise your killer instinct. If your aim is to be the Emperor of China, then you must be totally willing to kill or to be killed. Chinese history has proven that only those willing to go the distance in exercising their killer instinct see the final victory. The following story demonstrates this point. Liu Bang's military commander, Han Xin, was the same man who had been disgraced as a young man by being forced to crawl through the legs of the ruffian. Despite Han's reputation, Liu Bang had taken him into his service and Han had served him faithfully all the days of his life. After the defeat of Xiongnu and Liu Bang's ascension to the throne, Han became the second most powerful man in China. His troops had placed Liu Bang on the throne, they could as easily depose him. But Han Xin could not forget that Liu Bang had the first emperor of the Ming dynasty. In 1368, Chu Yuanzhang, a beggar from a peasant family, led the Chinese people in the overthrow of the mighty Yuan dynasty, which was established by the Mongols after then returned from their victorious conquering of Europe. Chu established the Ming dynasty which ruled China for 300 years. The peasants who had followed Chu in the revolution now expected proper rewards. If Chu had kept them in court and placed them in distinguished positions, these people would have shown him no respect, because they still saw him as what he had been before, just another fellow peasant. Therefore, he would not have been able to rule with absolute authority. However, if Chu sent them home with monetary rewards, and did not grant them titles and positions, they would become discontented and possibly plot to overthrow him. So Chu decided to take action with the objective of securing his empire. Chu invited all of his peasant friends from the war to join him in a great celebration of the establishment of the Ming dynasty. He set the date and carefully chose an isolated building. He ensured an abundance of food and an unceasing flow of wine to be provided there. At the height of the celebration, he secretly left, locked every exit, and lit a fire which killed everyone inside. Leadership of Kunming. Killer instinct is not solely reserved for the vicious and cunning, it can benefit the virtuous and righteous as well. Kunming, a great military strategist and benevolent leader, lived around 200 AD. He has been praised by some Chinese historians as possibly being the wisest man to have lived during the 5,000 years of Chinese history. Kunming was very fond of General Ma, who was one of his talented young generals. Kunming recognized Ma's potential as a great military leader, and hoped to cultivate Ma as his successor. With talent like Ma's, Kunming felt hope for his task of defeating his strong enemies and re-establishing the glory of the Han dynasty for the overly young emperor. In one of the decisive campaigns, Kunming ordered General Ma to a battle and repeatedly instructed him to occupy a specific small town to act as a decoy in order to tie up the enemy troops there. Kunming knew the brilliant, young, and arrogant Ma was like a highly spirited pony that needed time to be broken in. Kunming assigned General Ma two of his best advisors to ensure Ma a speedy victory with no unexpected surprises. When General Ma engaged in battle with the enemy, he totally ignored Kung Ming's instructions. Despite objections from his advisors, General Ma led his troops to the top of the mountain. The enemy cut off General Ma's food and water supplies from below. He was quickly defeated, thus rendering Kung Ming unable to execute his overall battle plan. Upon General Ma's return, Kung Ming ordered his execution. One of the respected old generals begged Kung Ming to spare Ma's life. He said, "Our nation is surrounded by strong, multinational troops, it is a shame to waste a talented general." But Kung Ming replied, "Law and order must be adhered to. In order to keep the discipline of the troops, I must set an example." While weeping, Kung Ming beheaded General Ma. The bankable commodity. Those who possessed a healthy dose of ambition in ancient China, coupled with the freedom to exercise their well-developed killer instinct, were often rewarded. Not so long ago, Middle Eastern terrorists took Russian personnel hostage. KGB agents responded swiftly by kidnapping close relatives of the responsible terrorist leaders. The KGB cut off body parts of these relatives and sent them along with notes warning that the terrorists' wives and children would be the next targets of retribution if the Russian prison heirs were not immediately released. The hostages were quickly released, and no Russian has been taken hostage since. In our civilized world, most of us do not kill anyone in order to secure our personal interests. The tools for achieving one's goals have changed, but the guiding spirit remains the same, and the outcome on the victims is equally as deadly. In the last decade, the American financial world has become the ideal incubator, nurturing those who possess some degree of the natural killer instinct and eventually cultivating them into perfect killers in the world of high finance. Some of these people are motivated solely by greed. Armed with a perfected killer instinct and impeccable social standing, this combination of elements renders them almost unbeatable. Even though a few are caught, many escape the hammer of justice. A Wall Street friend of mine told me privately that for every one caught, there are 10 more who weren't. In this country, wealth bestows a halo of dignity to those who possess it, and they are placed in the esteemed company of the most respectable entrepreneurs and dignitaries. Even though they may acquire this wealth by unconscionably robbing millions from the faceless public and leading many to their financial death, as long as they appear respectable and are not caught in the process, we Americans deify them. It is sad but true that one who possesses and is willing to use a perfect killer instinct was, and always will be a bankable commodity. The secret of asking for money. While a healthy and well-developed killer instinct can aid the greedy, it can also assist us in accomplishing our worthy tasks, or help us overcome unexpected obstacles in life. Therefore, it is essential for us to explore the elements and the state of mind behind that perfect killer instinct. The best way to examine this subtle state of mind is by looking at a particular experience many of us have in common. A difficult thing for many sensitive people is to ask for money from others. Whenever we have to do so, there are conflicts of feeling arise from within. The large corporation can easily raise money compared with the small, starting business. Small entrepreneurs wishing to generate the necessary working capital often find it is difficult to open their mouth and ask for money. Yet the ability to raise money is an essential skill for any entrepreneur. Mr. T. Boone Pickens recalls in his biography that his jobs were mostly centered around raising money. In his early years he was raising money either for land leases, or for oil well drilling funds. He acknowledged that it is a never-ending task. Don is the master when it comes to asking others for money. I have never met Don, yet through a friend of mine, Edward, Don has become a living entity in my mind. In the mid-1960s Edward met Don. At the time, Don was wanted in 13 states for fraud and embezzlement. Despite Don's moral shortcomings, you have to give him credit for his ability to raise money. Without emulating his motives and moral standards, we can learn from him his perfect execution of that killer instinct in raising money. Confucius said, "Whenever I walk among two other people, it does not matter their social status and accomplishments, at least one of them will be able to teach me the knowledge that I do not possess." Don sometimes raised money for projects which did not exist. Occasionally, he delivered what he promised. One time, Don asked for $50,000 for a wonderful venture from a group of people who had connections with the underground. Immediately after he obtained the $50,000, he took the money and hit the nearest bar. He bought drinks for everyone and blew over $1,000. The next day, he invited Edward to Reno and gambled away the remaining money. When his investors caught up with him, in front of Edward, they pointed a pistol at him and demanded their money back. Don told the gangsters, in a composed, collected, and detached manner, that a rival gang had stolen their merchandise. Then he smoothly proceeded to state that the only chance to recuperate the lost money was for them to provide him with additional $5,000. Don was like a skilled bullfighter standing calmly in front of the angry bull and skillfully delivering the final kill. Edward could not believe his eyes. These toughs actually lowered their guns and gave him another $5,000. One time Edward asked Don, "What is your secret of asking for money?" Don replied, "You ask by asking." Edward said, "But, I have difficulties opening my mouth. My mind has many considerations that leave me unable to open my mouth." Don looked straight into Edward's eyes and said, "You cannot worry about that. You have to ignore totally whatever your mind is telling you, and will wholeheartedly on your task, asking for the money." This is the state behind the spirit of that killer instinct. The 16th century Japanese sword master, Miyamoto Musashi said, "Whatever state of mind you are in, ignore it. Think only of cutting." Don possesses this killer instinct naturally. It is part of who he is. However, his talent is terribly misguided. If he devoted his talent to fundraising for worthy causes, he would be an invaluable asset to himself and others. Nevertheless, his words are profound. He described a state of mind that is totally detached from all considerations except the completion of the immediate objective. This totally focused state of mind is the essential driving force behind that perfect killer instinct. Without it, your actions and words are powerless and ineffective. Never go to bed without collecting first. At one time I worked for an American company on a retainer basis to develop their market in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Wally and I reached an oral agreement that his company would pay me a monthly fee plus a percentage of the sales. Shortly after I began working with Wally, I presented my regular working contract to him. We worked together on some minor wording problems, and Wally promised to have the contract retyped. As I got to know Wally better, I was charmed by his integrity and professionalism. Because of this I neglected to follow up on the unfinished contract. If there was one person I could trust, Wally was the one. Before I even noticed, 3 years passed by and the contract had not been signed. However, I wasn't worried. Then Wally sold his 50% interest to his German partner. I was still not concerned about my unsigned contract. After all, Wally's son-in-law, Peter, was staying on as the president of the company, and Peter knew how hard I had worked for my money. Besides, I was good friends with Peter's wife and in-laws. After Peter took over the Asian project, I mentioned my unsigned contract to him. He repeatedly told me he would take a look at it, and that he didn't see any problem. After working with Peter for 1 year, I decided I would like to resign from my responsibility and unload some of my professional burdens. I told Peter that I would like the contract signed so I could continue to receive the entitled percentage. Peter said, "Well, we have to look at how many years you will continue to receive this commission, it may be 3 years, or 5 years. I reminded him that the original agreement had no termination. After 6 months, my negotiations were getting nowhere. The problem was, I had no leverage with which to bargain. I was at his mercy, and he would rather keep his money than be merciful. He was demonstrating his newfound power and trying to prove to himself what an excellent deal maker he was. Peter acted like a high-spirited bull standing in front of a bullfighter with a broken sword. I felt powerless, angry, and humiliated. Then I remembered the words of Japanese sword master, Musashi, whatever state of mind you are in, ignore it. Think only of cutting. I thought to myself, Peter is acting tough, but if I can find his jugular vein, I can come in for the kill even with my broken sword. I telephoned him and made it quite clear that if he did not settle this matter with me in a timely manner, I would have no choice but to inform all of the Asian customers I had introduced him to that he was trying to cheat me out of my entitled financial interests. I assured him that this was not an idle threat, rather a measure of desperation. I delivered my punch. D then proceeded to speak to his sense of honor, because Peter valued himself as a devoted Christian. Peter, I am in a totally powerless situation and am at your mercy, somewhat like the prostitute who doesn't collect her money before she goes to bed with the customer. When all is finished, she wants her money. If the customer does not honor their agreement, there is nothing she can do about it. The customer already has what he wanted. I am in the same situation as that prostitute, asking you to honor an agreement from which you have already reaped the benefits. I am threatening you because I have no other alternative, I have no other cards to play. When you corner a dog and give him no way out, he will jump over the wall, whether he wants to or not. Well, it worked. Peter realized that my humiliation was so great that I might do anything to take my revenge. The possibility of destroying his personal reputation and that of his company among the Asians was very real. We worked out a compromise that he would pay my commission for an additional 21 years. At the end of our conversation, he asked me, "What is the topic of the book that you are working on?" I told him, "How not to get screwed by others." He laughed and said, "You haven't lost your sense of humor." In fact, he didn't know how literal my statement was. I must be cruel, only to be kind. The next element I want to discuss digresses slightly from the focus of this chapter, but the chapter is not complete without it. The question is, while we are dealing with the topic of killer instinct, when do we stop exercising the killer instinct and express our inborn human compassion? As William Shakespeare said in Hamlet, I must be cruel, only to be kind. You should never stop exercising your compassion. Have love in your heart, but be smart, express your compassion with restraint and detachment. Every human being has the desire to be abundantly generous and to give freely. This includes love, compassion, respect, and material possessions. Deep down, as a child of our divine Maker, we all wish to perform our labor free of charge, solely as an expression of love. At the same time, we wish to reward others with an abundance beyond their possible expectations. Yet, the reality of daily survival causes too many to feel contracted and fearful. Nevertheless, at one time or the other, we have shared our resources with the needy beyond our reasonable capability. In time, we notice, it is much easier to be compassionate and provide for the nameless and faceless needy person than for those we consider to be our special ones. This is because, through experience, we see our compassionate generosity often abused. It seems to some, the more you give, the more you should give. These people act as if you owe them. Out of your desire to be kind, you expose yourself without a protective shield. Strange but true, we often abuse those who support and love us the most. Beth and Lisa have known each other more than 20 years. Lisa is a divorced woman and has lived alone for over 10 years. Recently Beth was informed by her husband that he wants out of their marriage. Beth moved in with Lisa, while her house was being sold. Lisa was sympathetic to Beth and wanted to help her all she could. She let Beth stay with her free of charge, in order to cut down Bern's living expenses. Lisa opened her arms and heart to a wounded friend. She catered to Beth's every need. Beth moved out 6 months later, and the two of them have not spoken since. Lisa feels hurt and abused by this incident. She told me, I opened my heart and my wallet too quickly. D without reserve. I gave everything up front. I could not top my own performance, but Burns' expectations were ever rising. In order to be kind, we have to be cruel. A thick face, black heart practitioner learns the necessity of restraint, and controls his desire to be overly expressive of his compassion. Compassion is a state of mind, not a blind competition of how much you can do for others. Often, in order to be kind, we have to control our desire to do too much. Along the same lines, good parents learn the importance of controlling their urge to overly indulge and pamper their children, knowing, I must be cruel, only to be kind. Acquiring the killer instinct. The killer instinct is one aspect of thick face, black heart. Without it, thick face, black heart would be nothing but good intentions without the power and ability to act. The killer instinct is the power that propels us to take proper actions in spite of ourselves, keeping us on the path to our objectives. This killer instinct is within each one of us as part of our genetic coding. Due to our social programming, the idea of an inborn killer instinct is repugnant and we have suppressed it. Because this instinct is within us, we merely have to reacquaint ourselves with it. Remember when you first learned to flip a pancake in a frying pan? You started by rocking the pan to create a momentum that allowed the pancake to slide up and down inside the frying pan. Then with one throw into the air, the pancake turned and you caught it with the pan. When you are too timid and concerned about whether the pancake will fly too high and miss the pan, the result is your pancake will go up in the air a few inches, but won't have the height to turn. When it lands, you'll have a mess inside the pan. On the other hand, when you are too concerned that the pancake will not turn over, you use too much force, and the result is your pancake will probably land on the stove, outside of the pan. When you learn to flip a pancake, you need to explore your own inner realm, to be in touch with that state of mind which gives you the perfect strength, perfect control, and the perfect detached courage. Carefully observe your inner state. Watch for the moment, just before you throw the pancake high in the air and make that perfect landing. When you find that state of mind, recreate it often. It will help you to cultivate your perfect killer instinct. Learning to flip a pancake seems easy and not particularly profound. Yet, the truth of life is hidden everywhere equally. The lesson of acquiring the perfect killer instinct is not only in the drama of bullfights and the high finance of the business world, it also exists in its entirety in the flipping of a pancake. The state of mind which aids us in performing the mundane task of flipping the pancake is the same state of mind which executes the perfect killer instinct. When I speak of flipping a pancake, it is not about the pancake. It is about being in touch with that something inside of you that provides you with the courage to overcome your inner timidity and considerations. It is about tapping into that state of perfect strength, perfect control, and perfect detachment in fulfilling your worthy objectives. The surgeon's strength. I once spoke with a young surgeon who had served in Vietnam. He told me, medical school ill-prepared me for the horrors of war and mutilations that human beings are capable of inflicting on one another. During my time of Vietnam, I performed my duty only because my devotion for my fellow men and sense of loyalty to my duty were stronger than my fear. That loyalty transformed my fear into pure courage and strength in spite of myself. Recently, I underwent a minor operation to have a benign tumor removed from my breast. The doctor gave me only a local anesthetic, so I was conscious during the whole procedure. Although I couldn't feel any pain, I could feel my breast being pulled very strongly from every direction as if the surgeon were cutting up a rubber doll. She performed her work with dispassion and detachment, but this attitude did not disturb me. On the contrary, I found great comfort in it. While she was working, I felt a tremendous affection pouring out from her hands. This affection that I experienced came from her dedicated detachment in accomplishing the objective. Just like a child who has a thorn in his hand, what would be the greater kindness, to pick gingerly at the thorn so that it remains in the wound and festers, or to remove it with assurance even though you may cause the child a moment of pain. The circumstances that brought forth the inner strength of both surgeons were different, yet both were true to their professional objectives. Within this detached strength lies a signpost to the mystery of the killer instinct, the root of thick face, black heart. Summary of key points. 1. To succeed in life, you must have the will and tenacity to finish the job. 2. The courage to finish the job quickly and cleanly, that is the killer instinct, the root of black heart. Every great man and every great villain has it. 3. This killer instinct can help an individual accomplish great tasks to benefit mankind, and it can propel an individual to bring destruction upon the earth. 4. A knife has great utility value, and without it, life would be extremely inconvenient, yet a knife is also a deadly weapon. 5. The killer instinct is another aspect of the thick face, black heart. It has ensured man's survival against the hostile elements of nature, as well as from one another, since the time of the caveman. 6. If we have any hope of correcting our timid nature, we must not turn our faces away from the dark side of reality. 7. If our enemies are incorporating the killer instinct and victimizing us, we do not have the luxury of avoiding the topic. As the great military strategist Sun Tzu said, "Know yourself, know your opponent, 100 battles, 100 victories." 8. It is sad but true that one who possesses and is willing to use a perfect killer instinct is, was, and always will be a bankable commodity. 9. I must be cruel, only to be kind. You should never stop exercising your compassion. Have love in your heart, but be smart, express your compassion with restraint and detachment. 10. The killer instinct is one aspect of thick face, black heart. Without it, thick face, black heart would be nothing but good intentions without the power and ability to act. 11. The killer instinct is the power that propels us to take proper actions in spite of ourselves, keeping us on the path to our objectives. This killer instinct is within each one of us as part of our genetic coding. 12. Acquiring the killer instinct. The truth of life is hidden everywhere equally. The lesson of acquiring the perfect killer instinct is not only in the drama of bullfights and the high finance of the business world, it also exists in its entirety in the flipping of a pancake. 13. It is sad but true that one who possesses and is willing to use a perfect killer instinct is, was, and always will be a bankable commodity. 14. I must be cruel, only to be kind. You should never stop exercising your compassion. Have love in your heart, but be smart, express your compassion with restraint and detachment. 15. The state of mind which aids us in performing the mundane task of flipping the pancake is the same state of mind which executes the perfect killer instinct. 16. Flipping a pancake is not about the pancake, it is about being in touch with that something inside you that provides you with the courage to overcome your inner timidity and considerations. It is about tapping into that state of perfect strength, perfect control, and perfect detachment in fulfilling your worthy objectives. You don't manage people, you manage things. You lead people. Grace Hopper, U.S. Navy Admiral, retired.